Good morning, afternoon, and evening from wherever you are joining us today. My name is Rashmita and I'm the event planner for Microsoft Reactor India. This session will run over the next 60 minutes, including Q&A. But before we begin, please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We are all here to learn together, so please be respectful of other people's views, understanding of differences, being kind and considerate in the way you engage. The chat section will be open throughout, and we do encourage you all to participate. I would now like to welcome Swam, our speaker for today's session. Swam is working at Microsoft as a program manager with the Power BI customer advisory team. She has 13 plus years of experience, specialized on wide breadth of MSBI technologies with Power BI right from her initial days. Prior to Microsoft, she was leading the Power BI COE team. But for now, I will hand over to Swam to begin the session. But before that, let me bring her into the StreamYard. Hey Swam, how are you doing today?
Hi, Rashmita. Good day. I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you
Good.
for coming and hosting at Reactor. With this, now I would like to hand over the floor to you to begin the session. Also, let me bring your presentation.
Absolutely. Good. Thank you so much, Rashmita, for this opportunity. And good evening, good day to all of you, whosoever is attending. Um, Let us start. Um, So today's session is all about best practices, Power BI reporting best practices. So this is the first part of the series that I'm starting, called as Optimizing Power BI series. I will be conducting some more best practice sessions after today. So keep tuned in. Keep tuned in. Okay. Okay. Moving on. I think Rashmita has already put up my introduction, but let me give my introduction again. I'm a program manager at Microsoft, and I work with the Power BI customer advisory team, and we directly engage with customers to understand how their adoption is going on in Power BI, right? Understand their Power BI platform, and that's where I have gained a lot of insights on how things are being done in various organizations. And that's where I thought, why not conduct some optimizing Power BI series? And I will go into the context, and that's where I want to bring in the context as in why best practices are important for Power BI success in an organization. To start with, what does successful solution mean to you? It's all about creating maximum impact, right? Where the solution is consumed, efficiently consumed by maximum number of end users, right? In terms of Power BI, you can say a successful Power BI solution is one which provides a unique and easy way to understand storytelling user experience, which is efficient and of course easy to maintain in due course of time. You can say such a solution will have maximum impact and maximum adoption among the end user community. But how do we ensure that a solution is successful? How do we do that? We need to ensure that some of the best practices, that the guidelines that are provided by the tool, uh, uh, is actually implemented at different stages of development, whether it's in design phase, development phase, collaboration phase, or maintenance phase. These best practices or guidelines, when followed and implemented, can produce and maintain optimized Power BI solutions, and thereby contributing to the success of the Power BI, right? Now, these guidelines can also be, if you see, can also be implemented at different architectural layers, like at data source level, data modeling level, report visuals level. It may be Power BI or paginated, or of course at the environment level, whether you are using different capacities, premium capacities, or different gateways, or maybe network even, right? Now, today's session, the one best practices that we will cover are not generally frequently talked about. But in my experience, I have found it to be very important to follow at different stages of development. Okay, good. Um, so let's see what are we going to learn about today. We are going to see the top best practices, and those are deciding storage mode of the data beforehand, considering wireframing of report design, follow query reduction techniques, um, checking if the query folding to the data source is working and implemented or not, sharing Power BI content through Power BI apps, and encouraging using reusing data sets, I should say. Now, if you've seen, I'm only touching 6 points. A lot to talk about all of these points in the subsequent slides. But if you note, the first 2 points you would like to consider in the design phase. The next 2 points, query reduction and query folding during development phase, and sharing and reusing data sets during the collaboration phase. So I've just cherry picked two from each phase to give you and have a deep dive on them. Right? Good. Now let's move into the next one, which is the deciding the storage mode before design. Power BI has different storage modes, right? Import mode, direct query, composite models. Import mode is something which where all the data stays inside Power BI. Direct query is connecting directly to your data source. All your visuals will be executed at runtime whenever they are rendering, I mean. And composite model is a mixture of import and direct query, where either one of your data source will be in import mode or another one in direct query, or a mix of direct query and maybe live, right? Now, before deciding the storage mode, you definitely would like to understand what's your licensing requirements. How does cost play a huge role here? And of course, you would like to consider data growth. I'm talking more about this in this next slide. Let's talk about license. If you consider Pro, if your organization has Pro license, you would know that import mode would have a limitation of 1 GB. Now, that 1 GB is, of course, a compressed size of the data. However, still, it's limited. What would you do if the data increases from 1 GB to the next stage? You would definitely consider direct query, isn't it? So, if you have otherwise, on the other hand, if you have premium, you would directly consider um, import mode, maybe because there is no limitation of um, data storage with respect to different SKUs. Of course, there are limitation with different SKUs. However, underneath it, there is unlimited storage, right? Data latency. How quick do you want your data into your system? You might want to have real time data in your reports. That's when you go for direct query. Your data source might have batch data. That's when you might go for import, right? Or at a certain point of time, as maybe if you're going for composite model, you would want some of the data coming in as real time, and some maybe some data is not changing um, very frequently, so you might want an import. That's where you would also like to consider dual mode too, right? Dual mode is also considered to be a performance enhancement, which I'll talk in the last point. Let's consider data source type. Now, everybody would be thinking, why data source type? Think about API. The API data is not something that you can do with direct query. You definitely have to import it, right? Now, data source type also depends on how much your data source is tuned or optimized or is capable of handling concurrent queries. Suppose your data source is already busy in all kind of batch processes that's in there. You might not Your data source might not be able to handle a lot of concurrent queries, which is uh, uh, which will be shot by or executed from front end or Power BI. So at that point of time, you might want to consider import mode. Import a certain amount of data at certain frequency and let it be there in Power BI for consumption. Right? That way, you don't. put pressure on your data source. The next is data volume. Data volume is a huge role to play in storage mode, in deciding storage mode. Now, I know that there is, I think you all know that there is a storage limit in all premium capacity. Suppose your organization doesn't have premium capacities, what will you do? And you have huge amount of data to query. You definitely go for direct query. Suppose you have a P1 which has a limitation of uh, um, 25 GB, then you would not have import. You cannot have data sets more than 25 GB, right? A single data set more than 25 GB. What if there is more? And I have seen organizations with 100 GB of data. What would you do then? You definitely would move to direct query, isn't it? Data integration. Data integration also plays a major role, right? Now, suppose you want to integrate an import mode with the direct query, you would go for composite models. In in many situations, you would also like to go for dual mode when you want to create aggregations. That's where performance features come in, because I think all know the direct query sometimes may perform slow. Even if there are a lot of enhancements going on in direct query, import mode is the fastest. So in certain scenarios, we would definitely like to cache some data inside Power BI, and maybe some which is real time, maybe, or which tables which have huge amount of data you would like to query as direct, right? Makes sense. So direct query storage mode is an important point to consider, and one of the best practices to consider it before design. Once you decide what storage mode you want to have, maybe then you can go ahead in development mode. But hold on a minute. We have another point to consider in design phase: wireframing report design. Wireframing is often the most challenging um, phase I've seen that business users do face in their report uh, um, design and development um, phase. And it's one of the most overlooked one too, because I've seen, consider organization who is moving to migrate into Power BI reports, and if they are not wireframing, not considering some of the features which Power BI has readily, for example, drill down, drill up, Q&A, personalize, you would not be delivering the tool to its potential, right? So wireframing is very important. With all the features that Power BI has, it's important that you wireframe, sit with the business user, understand what features would give you a strong guidance to storytelling with the data, right? Wireframing can drive an efficient dashboard development, believe me. This is one of the learnings that I have got working with many organizations, right? Now, when I say wireframing, I actually would like to prioritize accessibility and, of course, delivering tools potential. I would like to put up to front some of the features that are put here. Deciding between a filter and a slicer pane, whether you want to have a filter pane or a slicer pane, maybe decide during the wireframing phase. Why not? Remember, filter pane gives you advanced filtering capabilities, while slicer pane cannot. However, slicer pane gives you the ability to slice um, selected report pages, which filter pane cannot. So you might definitely would like to understand and decide between which fields would you like to have in filter pane and which ones in slicer, right? Drill up, drill down actions, very important. I think one of the most important features that a report should have. Buttons, bookmarks, they are fancy yet very useful. Comments and code encourages maintainability of the code for the developers who would be taking over from you later on. Adding synonyms and descriptions. You know, add synonyms to your columns, descriptions to your tables and columns will assist in Q&A if you add a Q&A feature in your um, report. Proper color themes and fonts. Color themes and fonts are one of the main important feature for accessibility, if you know, for the colorblind, for making reports accessible to every other people out there. Correct visual type. You know, I have seen people creating report pages with pie charts only, which doesn't make sense, right? So, correct visual type is very important. Personalized visual. Now, you, as a matter of fact, I think everybody knows you don't cram a lot of visuals inside one report page. If you really want to give the user flexibility to decide what visual he or she wants, why not give the user ability to personalize a visual? And I will talk more about this later. Ability to export, conditional formatting within a chart or a table. Using visual header, remember, visual header gives you the ability to add comments, gives you the ability to add tooltips, gives you the ability to add information about that specific chart. Why not use that, right? Also, in accessibility, I would like to highlight very poorly used feature, which is the mobile layout. Mobile layout is one of the most prominent feature that I advise designers to actually plan. The reason why, you are giving a capability on to the end user on the go. I'm not advising you to add all the visuals to your mobile layout. You have the choice of adding only few KPIs, few filters, minimal actions, but with clear directions in the mobile layout, right? So I look at a dashboard when I'm on desktop, when I am at a desktop view. However, when I'm on the go, I just look at the prominent KPIs that I would like to have data on and just move on, right? It's one of the most underutilized feature. Mobile layout is huge, and the capabilities that are being added continuously in it makes it so powerful. You know, I think mobile Power BI mobile app is one of the best mobile app available for any visualization tool in the market, right? Okay, let's move on. User guide for consumers. How does a user guide look like? You know, provide all the definitions, provide all how they can report for bug, how they can report for excess issues, how they can report for data inaccuracy. What does each KPI mean for them? It's important that you highlight in the user guide. I have seen end users coming to me and asking, "Oh, what does this mean? What does this mean? I don't know how to utilize drill through. I don't know how to utilize drill down functionality, highlighting functionality, sorting functionality." Why not provide a user guide for the end users to empower them to use your Power BI report successfully? I've seen developers adding key influencer visuals, which is an AI visual, and not adding comments about them. How would you expect an end user know about key influencers visual if you don't mention it to them? So add in the key user guide for consumers. By user guide also means highlighting such kind of information. So these information that you see here is highlighted with the help of arrows, right? Why not do that? Right. Now let's move on to the next one, the query reduction, right? The query reduction is as the name says, reduce the query, reduce the number of visuals. That reduces the number of query, doesn't it? Yes, I think it's the same. So yes, reduce the number of queries, reduce the number of visuals that you have in your um, reports. That will reduce the number of queries. But adding a lot of buttons and bookmarks will actually add up to the queries, and I'll show you how. But before that, let me show you one of the new features that has recently come in, and how will it help in query reduction. There's something called as apply all and select clear all slicers. Okay, let me show that to you. I have a small GIF. I will show that to you first, and then we will move to a quick demo. Okay, so if you see this short video, you will see that apply all is all about all the selections in the slicers being applied at simultaneously. So what apply all button does, it detects all the selections that you have done and then activates itself and allows the end user to um, to apply all of them simultaneously. How does that help? That helps by um, that helps by reducing the number of slicer queries. Each time that you select, there's a slicer query that goes for each visual. That this apply all button reduces that. Okay, let me move on to. I'm thinking we can give you a moment. Sorry for that. So if you look at this, okay, okay, let's move here. I think I'm in the right place. Okay, so suppose I go to the optimize visual and I say apply all button, or I can also add it here, insert. The moment I do this, I have this apply all slices. So now if I check for customer city, for example, Beaverton, okay, you will see there is a small tick mark. Okay, this small uh, clock icon that shows that this is not applied yet. Only if I click on apply slices, it will be applied. Let's select a subcategory saying bike racks. Okay, and I will now apply all. Okay, now I'm applying everything. Okay, let's add another button which calls as clear slices. Now, clear slicers detect that the apply all slices have been all the slices have been applied in the visuals, because every visual will be able to in every visual you will be able to see customer city and subcategory as bike stands. So the clear all slices will be activated automatically. The moment you click on the clear slicers, everything will be reverted back. Right? Let's do it once more. I see accessories, and I also have a product name which is called, okay, all purpose bike stand. The moment I click on this clock icon comes in and my apply slices button activates. So I'll click on apply slices and everything is applied. If you see, let's hover on to a visual, you will see its product categories, accessories, and product name is bike, all purpose bike stand. Now my clear apply all slices is grayed out. My clear all slices is active. I'll click on clear all slices and there you go. Right? How does it help? All the slicer queries that short every time I'm being selecting is actually um, reduced. Only when I click on apply slices is my all my slices is getting applied. Remember, this capability was available already. There was a workaround. However, now it has become much more easier, isn't it? Right. Let's move on. I think I've lost my second screen, so I'll try to put it up here. Okay, I've lost my cursor too. Okay, so this is all about apply all slices and clear all slices. Let's talk about optimize ribbon in Power BI Desktop. There you go. Okay, so let's work on the optimized ribbon. I think this is very interesting and I definitely would like to show this. Um, so let's pause all the visual, okay? Now let's bring in let's turn this into some different color, and I would like to add some colors. And if you see here, when I added colors, I see there's a this says the visual has pending changes. Now this that means my query hasn't hit the my server yet, right? The moment I refresh it, only then it shows sales by product category and color. Okay. Okay. Now, what's the difference between refresh and resume? Resume would end the pause state. Refresh would not end the pause state. However, just refresh the query for once. Okay. Now, let's consider something else. Okay. Um, I would resume the visual queries and pause visuals once and would add product color. Okay. Right. So when I resume visual queries, no, when I refresh, if you see, this pause state is not actually changed. I can still see the pause state, right? So that means I can change another visual, but it will still be in pause state, right? The moment I say resume visual queries, all my queries are refreshed and my pause state also um, moves down. Right. Okay. Now, how does this optimized ribbon helps? As I said, it helps mostly in direct query scenarios and authoring scenarios where you don't shoot the end user doesn't the author doesn't shoot queries every time he or she make changes in the report. Right. Let's move on. I'm working on limited capacity network bandwidth, I believe. Okay, good. This is the pause, refresh, resume slide, which I already talked about. Um, let's talk about personalized visual. I think you've already seen, and this GIF is more than enough to explain what personalized visual does. Um, Sometimes it's very hard for the end user to actually be satisfied with one kind of visual. End users or business analysts would like to have different perspective on different data, right? So I have seen personalized visuals to be one of the best flexibility that you can provide to the end users. Through personalized visuals, you can allow end users to choose to uh, um, personalize the visual type. As you can see, the visual type can be changed. You can change the access. You can add legends. You can change values. By changing all of these, the underlying reports are not changed at all. The view is changed only for the end user, and it can be saved also. So the end user can save it as a personal bookmark. However, the underlying view, what the report author has provided, doesn't change at all. So through personalized visual, you can provide a huge amount of flexibility. How does this help in query reduction? Just think about this. You don't have to create tens of visual in a report. Just make one personalized visual available and let end user explore the data that you have. I think there's one more point I should add. Personalized visual, if you are giving this capability of personalized visual, your model has to be correct. Your model has to have business names, right? So you cannot have your dimension table as dim underscore product. Rather, you should have product table and not dim underscore product underscore name. It's product name. So business user names, right? So that would make sense. Right. Good. Let's move on. Good. Let's talk about query folding a bit. Um, Query folding is the way how data is folded to the data source. The query is folded to the data source. That means instead of Power Query or Power BI executing the query in its engine, let's send it to the data source. Now, I think I remember before moving more into yet explaining in more of query folding, I think there was one statement which one of my esteemed colleagues had mentioned. His name is Matthew Roche. He mentioned that data should be transformed as far as upstream as possible and as far downstream as necessary. This simply means that all your transformations on the upstream as close to the data sources as possible. Only do transformations that you need for that specific business scenario in Power Query. Now, um, if you're really doing transformations on Power Query, I think that's where query folding is used. Now, let me explain again. Query folding is the ability of Power Query to generate a single SQL statement against the data source, right? Now, ideally, as I mentioned, all data transformations should be in data source. But a lot of times, for examples in import, during import, you need to refresh some of the data sources, some of the data tables, and some might have gone through some of the transformations inside Power Query. That's where you might want to look whether query folding is taking place or not. If query folding is taking place, your Power Query engine will take less time to mash up the queries. Instead, will do all the mashing up in your data source and hence would be much, much more faster. If you're using data gateway, I think this becomes much, much more important. Okay. So uh, use transformations as close to data source as possible. Even if you're using transformations in Power Query, make sure that query folding is happening, right? Now, I hope if you have tried incremental refresh in Power BI, you would note that incremental refresh will happen against only those data sources where query folding happens. Because it's obvious, all kind of incremental refresh actually turns into partitioning, and partitioning is only possible when the data source can be converted into an SQL statement, right? Good. Let's try doing a small demo again. If you can see my screen, I'm just hoping it's sources. Yep, okay, cool. So if you see, both of my tables have the same queries, okay? If you see here, both of them have same queries. Let me, yep, both of them have same queries. This, I am showing two different tables because in the first one, I want to show that there is no query folding taking place. And the second one, how query folding is taking place. Let's consider a scenario that I want um, bottom um, 10 products. So I have almost 2,500 products here, and I would like to have top 10 bottom 10 rows, right? How would I do that where non query folding is not happening? Let's do something as keep rows, keep bottom rows as 10. Okay, and I say okay, and then I would suppose I would like to choose only few columns. Okay, so let's choose few columns. I want to have product key, product name, um, manufacturer, brand name, and color name. There's 5 columns, and I say okay. Now I think a lot of you know. If not, let me show you the most easiest way, though not most definitive way, that a query folding is happening. To see whether a query folding is happening is to see whether the view native query is grayed out or not. So if it is grayed out, that most of the time means query folding is not happening, right? So in this case also I see view native query is grayed out. That's why query folding is not happening. Okay. Now let's consider another scenario where query folding is happening, where I am choosing the columns first. Let me choose the columns first. Not product description, manufacturer, brand name, and color name. Okay. Say okay. Right? And now I sort them as descending, and then I keep the top rows. Yep. At this time, if you see, my view native query is actually not grayed out. That means query folding is happening here. So if I click on view native query, I can see this query is actually folded to the data source. That means this query is actually executing in the data source end, right? A quick demo. Let's move on to our PPT again. Okay, so let's let's know a little bit more about query folding. Okay, now I've shown you the quick demo. Let me tell you that there are some, not every step that you carry out, not every transformation that you carry out in Power Query results in query folding. And steps done in different manner also doesn't result in query folding all the time. So if you have seen in the demo, I have repeated both the two steps in two different sequence in the two different queries, right? One resulted in query folding and one did not. Similarly, there are different transformations which can lead to query folding and which doesn't lead to query folding. Some which can lead to query folding is removing, renaming, that can be easily translated to SQL. Merging queries, grouping queries, merging when both the queries are from the same data source, or appending when both the queries are from the same data source, right? Pivot and unpivot. Some of these transformations can actually be translated into SQL query. That's where query folding can actually make sense. And what does when which transformations cannot help in query folding? Merging queries for on different data sources, obviously. Sorting based on full sometimes sortings based on full data sets doesn't work out. Some custom logics also doesn't work out. The only way to see whether query folding is happening for that particular transformation is to check view native query. There's another way to check query folding, which is called as query diagnostics. I'm not going to cover it today, but definitely when I'm covering a session on query folding. Okay, good. I think there's one more thing. The query folding indicators. Now, in Power BI desktop or Power Query desktop, you would not be able to see this query folding indicators. It's very hard to know whether the query folding is literally happening or not. However, in data flows, it's very much easier to understand whether query folding happening or not, and and which is indicated by these query folding indicators. Um, so there are different indicators for query folding. You can definitely try it out. That's very, very interesting, and I'm quite sure it's going to come in Power BI desktop very soon, right? Good. Let's move on. I'm going to talk about sharing with Power BI org, which is the collaboration best practices that I have pointed out. Sharing is very much important um, in terms of with whom you are sharing and how you are sharing. Sharing is easy way to collaborate. Nowadays, the complexities of sharing and the way that sharing can happen is very much increased, right? You can share with teams, you can embed in PowerPoint, Excel, use in Power Automate, etc. Okay, so sharing is the easiest way, and there is the scope of sharing and collaboration has increased. And it's very much become easy to share with teams, share, embed in PowerPoint, embed in Excel, using with Power Automate, Power Apps. Therefore, it becomes much more easy to much more important to see how you are sharing, whether you have applied RLS, row level security, or not. How can your users apply request for access? The whole access management is very important, right? um, I think it's also very important to understand and to be aware of the tenant settings on sharing, whether you are allowed to share with external users or not. How can you invite your users for external users to look into your reports, whether your external users can have access to the data set or not, right? It's very important. Good. Let's move on and understand a little bit more about sharing. Now, if you see, there are three ways I can provide access to the end users, right? Access to workspace, which is not recommended. You have to be very careful while giving access to um, uh, uh, giving access to some of the contents. I think data marts and data flows are only content that they have to be given access to workspaces, isn't it? There's no way out. However, if I talk about reports and dashboards, the recommended way to provide access is through Power BI apps. Now, Power BI apps, if you know, do have the feature of multiple audiences where you can share different sets of reports and dashboards, and of course, some extra links of feedback, SharePoint, etc. And and share it with targeted audience sets, right? So suppose I have 10 reports, all my even reports to one set of users, all my odd reports to another set of users, and you know and give them the ability to give provide feedback through Microsoft Forms, adding a link there. I think the capability is huge and it's so important to leverage, and that's the right way to do it. While sharing with the audience, you would also like to keep in mind whether if you are providing access for reshare, whether you are providing access for the underlying data set. Very, very important. Now, suppose you have put up a data set where some super users would like to analyze and create more reports. You definitely need to provide build access to them. But keep in mind, when you are providing access, to whom you are providing access, and that's why the right way to do it is through security groups. Because otherwise, if you do it with individual IDs, it creates chaos. But if you do with security groups, dedicated security groups for you know people who can get share access, people who can get reshare access, people who get access to one set of reports, etc., it would be much more managed. I agree, there is no easy way of access management in Power BI. However, there are good practices if we follow them. And I know organizations who have been following them and leveraging a good data governance through sharing content through Power BI apps. So, recommended way, share content to Power BI apps. I think after that, if you embed to Power BI, even in Teams, it will work. Okay. So, okay. Saying that, I would also like to make some scenarios be aware of. I know people are do not would not like to access service all the time. So I've seen organizations sharing Power BI file in email through OneDrive. It's not the recommended way to do it. Neither is through sharing through my workspace. I come across tens of requests saying, Swayam, in my organization, people have shared through my workspace, and now that person have left. How do I get back those reports? There is currently some workspace, my workspace admin provisions. However, it is recommended not to share through my workspace. My workspace is just a personal a playground, not to be used for sharing purpose, right? Also, to keep in mind not to provide workspace access, level access to all. Do not keep on providing admin access, member access, contributor access, or viewer access. Remember, if you have 10 reports, one QA, one dev, one prod, the person whom you are providing viewer access to can see all of these three. And the data might not match in all of them, right? Because they might be pointing to different servers and might create confusion for the end user. So why not share through content, share through organizational apps or Power BI apps, right? Good. Now, there are some tenant settings which you definitely, as a Power BI author, collaborator, you would definitely like to take care or be aware of. Some of them, for example, is published to web allowed? Is sharing with the external organizations allowed? How are we going to allow export to Excel or export to CSV? Or how do we create subscription? I think these sharing settings are very, very important to know for the end users. For the authors, sorry, not end users, authors. Okay, good. Let's move on. The last point is reusing data sets. Reusing data sets is one of the major factor promoting data culture within an organization. I have seen organization working on data silos like everything leading in data governance chaos. Everybody is creating their own data sets. Everybody is creating their own data marts. We have to, I don't, the options are available, but we have to use them responsibly, right? Reusing Power BI datasets promotes single source of truth. It prevents inaccuracies, discrepancies in data and metrics that the business analysts use, right? Not only this, think about this. If you reuse a dataset which is already created, um, you avoid creating the data model again and reduce the data to effort, reduce the effort that's needed to create this data model from scratch, right? Why would you like to create a whole data model when you know the metrics that are already available in another data set? Just simply ask for the permission. Now, I'll come to that a bit later, but permission part a bit later, but note that the skill set for data model creation or data set creation are quite different, right? Now, if I'm a Power BI author, I would need to know um, both how to create a data model and how to create good reports with good user experience. Why not segregate these two skills? I have seen BI developers creating, one who has good data warehouse knowledge, good modeling knowledge, create data sets, and then share it with the end users or business users who have the ability to create good visualizations, right? This is so it's what I'm trying to say is it can be beneficial to separate out data sets from the reports. I think this is one of the best practices. This is also highlighted in the Power BI documentation. Separate your data sets from your reports. This not only creates clarity in the roles, it also creates better data governance policies, right? Now, and and in my experience, I have seen organizations who have implemented such kind of separation. They have been able to do a better job in monitoring, in governance, and they complain less. Now, organizations often have large amounts of Power BI content, right? You might be asking, so you are saying go ahead and reuse the data set, but how do we know that data set already exists? That's where promoting and certifying data sets come into picture. Endorsement. Endorsement is a way to make it easier for users to find this high quality data sets that already been created in your organization. It's key, and data endorsement is a key feature in Power BI. It's already enabled in Power BI. And I would come to the point where how can you enable this on a data set? But um, uh, hold on. So let me explain a little bit how reusing data sets help in data governance. Just think about it. Less number of data sets in your system means less number of intermediate data sources, less data silos, or even the need to connect to multiple data sources multiple times is also reduced. I have come across with organizations who have applied this promotion endorsement of data sets and have reduced the data content in their Power BI, and they have been using premium capacities. The data content in their premium capacities have reduced almost half. So these endorsement is a data governance best practice, right? And Power BI data flow and shared data sets are actually part of that. So I really encourage end users, authors to have shared data sets, to create certified data sets, to promote their data sets, and to have data flows which are reusable business logic. Just think about this. When you create a data model in Power BI Desktop, you can connect to different data flows and you don't have to replicate the logic anymore. right? And you can just create a new data set out of no logic. You don't have to put any effort for logic creation, right? You just have to maybe connect the tables that are the end products of those data flows. Perfect. So I encourage to use reuse the data sets and data flows, right? And they can be used across workspaces. That's absolutely doable. Good. I did have to show one more thing, and that's the end of my session. Um, Give me a moment. So, if you see here, this is the data set level endorsement settings. So every data set settings is actually equipped with this endorsement and discovery configuration. So if you see, endorsement and discovery helps co-workers to find quality content by endorsing this data set. Either you can endorse it to promote it, which just promotes it, and certify it. When you say certified, that means this data set is actually certified by data owners, and data owners actually say that the metrics used in these data sets are stamped to be correct, right? So you would definitely like to make it discoverable. Do not forget to check that box, right? Superb. I think there's one more slide which shows the tenant settings to this. Uh, this is this is not the tenant settings. This is the data hub that you can see in your Power BI service, where all your endorsed and certified and promoted data sets will be seen. And you can ask for access. There is a three dot ellipse where you can ask for access. Okay. This is the tenant settings where you can activate allowing certification for your data sets. This is also important. And that's all that I had in my session. I'm s- I am very sorry that I there were some disruptions, but I hope you enjoyed it and could take some of the important points that we discussed here. I would be going ahead with some more discussions on best practices, data modeling, visualization, data flow. How to tune slow queries, how to use DAX Studio Tabular Editor to tune your queries better, and hope you would be able to attend that. Right? That's all. Thank you so much. I can take a few questions, Rashmita, if that's there.
Sure. Yeah, I think there are a few questions, but let me bring this question first, and then I can go probably.
Sure, I can
Uh,
also see some of them though. Yeah.
yeah, that's there on the screen.
Mhm. Okay, cool. So you're saying, does the workspace take place in data mart or data lake layer? I quite didn't understand your question. Workspace are logical folders within Power BI service. So if you log into Power BI, the SaaS application app.powerbi.com, you would see might have the ability to create workspaces. Um, uh, and workspaces are just logical folders where you can segregate your content with respect to different business area, maybe with respect to different phases of development, QA, product, etc. It's just a logical folder, nothing else. So I'm quite not sure what you ask about data mart and data lake. I think data lake, no, I think that is not very clear. I'm so sorry. Maybe you would like to explain a little bit.
Let me bring the next question.
Sure. Suggested version control solutions. um, there are new things coming in version control. I'm hoping there would be new things coming in. But currently, the only way of version control is through Workspace OneDrive. Uh, that's very basic, but that's quite useful for version controlling. Otherwise, there is no easy way to do it. Sadly. Okay. Okay. Next question. Okay.
I think this is one, but then there is a continuation of,
Okay.
for this question. Yeah.
I can see that. Okay. Can you suggest some wireframing tools for reports? Okay, that's one. For wireframing, I think that hands-on is the best way of wireframing. The reason is there's always back and forth on wireframing. We have clarity on the Power BI features that's available. That's much more important. What features, at the end of the day, what kind of storytelling that is does the business user would like to have, and I think the features can be then shown into the wireframes by just doing a rough sketch on hand. Believe me, face to face is much more helpful rather than having a full-fledged tool and doing a wireframe and publishing a wireframe. Believe me, you do not want to spend a lot of time on wireframing. While wireframing is important, it's an important part, but you would not like to spend a lot of time because things tend to change and new features may come in. Might want to um, you might want to stress more on the feature inclusion than what visuals you want, what should be the page length, what's the size of the visuals, etc. You would not like to have that. So do a sketch, but do a face-to-face conversation with your when you are gathering the requirement. um, I think 1 GB limit, as you said, 1 GB limit for data set in Pro license. We will be having 100 GB data size limit. 100 GB data size limit in case of PPU license. Okay. Uh, so, so PPU license, yes. So a PPU license also is based on the organization that you have procured the license from. It depends on number of PPU license that does an organization have. Remember, PPU license is equal to having a P3 at the backend. So you can have, I think, how does a P3 give? 100 GB? Yes, you can have 100 GB. Largest data set can have 100 GB. But if you are talking about dormant data sets, it can be 100 TB only. Remember, when I say dormant, that are not in memory, right? Um, can you suggest what kind of replacement can be given for pie charts? I think the best is bar chart. Bar chart is the easiest form of chart. It is an accessibility approved chart. So go ahead with bar charts. Bar charts can never go wrong. Clustered bar, stacked bar with appropriate information, with appropriate definition of what measure you are using, absolutely yeah, is bang on. Um, there is a new feature that has come in. I hope you have seen there's something called a smart narrative uh, in the visual header. Activate that. It is quite insightful when the whole visual is summarized in that small smart narrative tooltip. So maybe you would like to play around with that. Data flows or shared data sets, which would be better? Um, Both of them serve two different needs. Flows do not, uh, even if they store data and you can have direct query only on premium. Um, Data flows is mostly about storing business logic. I prefer data flows mostly for any kind of reusable business logic that can be used throughout workspaces, throughout different business areas. However, if I like to have a metric definition, because you cannot have a measure definition in data flow, right? Data flow will um, uh, uh, actually materialize everything that you every new column that you actually define in it. If you would like to have a measure, it's definitely on data set. So um, data flow and data set actually have two different use cases. Be aware of what you use when. For direct query performance on real time, usually we use SQL Profiler. In large scale continuous monitoring of multiple reports, do you have suggested solution? Um, Use DAX Studio. Have you used DAX Studio? DAX Studio is fantastic, and the new DAX Studio that has come in not only shows direct query performance, it also shows the impact on the Power Query engine, and it will also show you the waterfall chart of the visual rendering. So, you would be able to understand, okay, this query has taken a lot of time, due to which my one of the other query was not actually running for that period of time, was waiting for the other query to finish, for the first query to finish. So use DAX Studio. I think it's quite useful. SQL Profiler is very difficult to parse, very difficult to understand. Use DAX Studio. Though it's an external tool, I hope it's approved within your organization. Keep in mind, this is an external tool that might not be approved. Take approval if it's needed from the infosec, but DAX Studio is absolutely wonderful. Okay. What else do we have? I think that's it, isn't it, Rashmita?
Yes, I don't see any more questions in the chat, but yes, you can always reach out to Swam if you have any other questions, maybe not now, but later. And this is her link, which I will share on the chat. So probably you can reach out to her on
Absolutely.
LinkedIn. Can I go ahead and share your LinkedIn social
Absolutely.
handle, Swam?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
thank
absolutely.
you.
Thanks, Rashmita. And sorry, guys, everybody, for the interruptions. Um, I would like to handle that better, but sorry.
Thank you so much, Swam, for doing this amazing session, and thank you all for joining us today. Please feel free to use the Learn module links shared in the chat section.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, this will actually give you access to additional resources to take your learning further. Also, please visit our Microsoft Reactor Bengaluru meetup page for more upcoming session. Thank you all once again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.